You're listening to Real Talk Texas with local expert Steve Hakes. Now, here's Steve.
Welcome back to Real Talk Texas. I'm your host, Steve Hakes. We're heard every Sunday here at noon. And so if you're out driving around and you're looking for some real advice from real experts, I hope that you tune in every week to Real Talk Texas. And don't forget to go to realtalktexas.com, send me that email saying, send me that book, because Lori Ashmore Peters has offered up a great book to talk about wills and why you might need one. And so if you send me an email to our first 20 listeners that send us an email at realtalktexas.com, we'll be sending out those free books. So thanks for listening. So far in the show, we've talked with Lori about wills. We've talked about trust. We've talked a little about what is probate. And I'd like to go to the next, a little more sophisticated, I think, as far as planning goes, and that's using business structures for your personal planning. And so let's talk about that right now, Lori. What kind of business structures are out there to help us protect our assets?
Well, two of the most used, I think, business planning out there are your family limited partnerships that we call FLP, or your LLCs, your limited liability companies. It really depends on what your assets consist of, what your business is, if that's what you're wanting to keep in the family, and your family situation and your family structure. And depending on how all of that looks would determine whether or not you need more complex planning using this FLP or an LLC.
Well, I work a lot as a mortgage professional. I work a lot with real estate investors, and either they're commercial and they're buying apartment buildings. We have a lot of those. We have people that are just buying single family homes for rent, or like we had on our show last week with Nick Bristow, they do house flipping. So I'm wondering, if I'm a real estate investor, do I need to do some planning as far as that goes, or I keep it all in my own personal name?
You don't want to keep it all in your own personal name just for protection. If, God forbid, anything happens on any of those pieces of property and you're not properly insured and it's in your own personal name, then they can come after you and get a hold of all of your personal assets.
So if somebody walks onto a rental property of mine and slips on the front porch on a November ice storm like we had at the Super Bowl when that was going on, and they crack their head open, then I'm personally liable, right? If
it is not in any kind of a structure or vehicle or entity, if it's only in your name, then yes.
Okay.
So for those folks, I would say if you're buying real estate, then you would want to put them into the proper LLCs, depending on what types of real estate you're buying, depending on, is it commercial, is it residential, is it income producing, is it just a lot, is there a mortgage on it or not? So the answers to those questions would help me determine, do you just need one LLC depending on how many pieces of property you have, or do you need multiple LLCs? And again, that's for the asset protection.
Okay. And one of the things that we find as far as apartment loans that we do is that a lot of those set up single-purpose entities. So that apartment building, that business is set up as one LLC, and this client may have several LLCs that roll into him personally. He gets a K-1 each year on his taxes for each one of those businesses, so that he's protected.
He's protected personally, and if it's a single member LLC, there are some issues that can come up with that. So you really need to make sure that you're talking to a qualified estate planning attorney, as well as getting your CPA involved and your team involved to make sure that the LLCs that are set up are proper for what you need. One LLC, one size doesn't fit all. But again, for the scenario that you're giving, if it is just someone that is buying these apartment complexes or units, or someone that's just buying property to either as an investment or to flip, and their goal isn't to pass it down to younger generations or to their family, then an LLC would probably fit best for them.
And on a mortgage standpoint, we don't do loans to an LLC because you have to qualify and all those things. So typically our customers will take the loan out in their own name, and then they'll move that property into the LLC for protection purposes, but it doesn't really affect the lender and his mortgage that's on the property. So just throw that in there from my mortgage standpoint. Are there tax benefits that are involved in LLCs? Or
you do have tax benefits. You do get discounts, and it just really depends. It depends on what's going on. It depends on the types of property. And so, there are definite tax benefits for an LLC. It's not just strictly asset protection.
Okay, so let's talk about people that don't own real estate. Maybe they don't own a business at all. Is there a business structure that would help protect their assets as individuals or families? There
is. And, again, just depending on the types of assets that person has, depending on their family situation and depending on their worth. If it makes sense, one entity is a family limited partnership, because what that entity allows is, number one, it gives you the asset protection and the creditor protection. Number two, it does give you the discounts for tax purposes, for gift tax, estate tax purposes. But it also makes the family work together. And not only that, it's families who want to pass their assets on to other family members. And a lot of times we'll see it when we've got mom and dad. They've created this family limited partnership. They maintain the 1% ownership as the general partner. But what we do is we put that general partnership into an LLC for added protection.
That's different.
And then they will start transferring the assets in the FLP to their children as limited partners. And not only does it afford asset protection and creditor protection for mom and dad, but it also affords asset protection and creditor protection for the kids.
Would that be a safe haven from the estate tax?
It's not a complete safe haven, but there are discounts that can be associated with that. You shouldn't always just expect a discount, because the IRS, they're really scrutinizing them, as you can only imagine. But whether there's no discount or whether there may be up to a 50% discount or more, depending on what the assets are and depending on, was the FLP set up correctly? Was it run correctly? So you can definitely have a lot of benefit. But again, it depends on the family situation as to whether or not this will work. It also depends on your worth. If you have an asset that is maybe $500,000, depending on what your assets are, you may not want the FLP, because it is costly to set up, and you have to run it. It is a business.
Okay. We're talking with Lori Ashmore Peters of the Ashmore Law Firm located in Dallas, and she's our real expert for estate planning. And Lori, one of the things we talked about on the break was that you're not a CPA, but what you do is try to give that expert advice and have your own team of experts that you would refer people out to for advice on, collaboration when you're setting up the perfect situation for your customer. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Absolutely. For me, it's a matter of building that team. If someone comes to me and the first thing I'm going to do is determine what their estate consists of, determine what their goals and objectives are, and then I will start developing different vehicles that can achieve those goals and objectives. But again, depending on their worth, I want to bring in their CPA, or if they don't have a CPA, I recommend a few CPAs, and also their financial planner, because it's checks and balances for all of us. It's not just one person creating this entire plan, taking care of the taxes, the planning, the CPA, the financial planning, and you have a team of people involved. We can really make sure that we are doing what's best for that client. If their priority is for tax planning, to make sure that their tax planning is completely in order. If their priority is asset protection, to make sure they have the proper vehicles in place for that. Or if their priority is just for management purposes or privacy purposes. It's really having the entire team together to make sure that we're all working together.
And that's awesome. That's really kind of what we do here on Real Talk Texas. And what we're trying to do here and what we're succeeding at is putting together a team of experts that our listeners can go to realtalktexas.com, and whatever they're facing in their life or whatever they're planning for, they can go there and find the real experts in the Metroplex that we've vetted out, that we feel are people that we can wholeheartedly recommend. And we really recommend the Ashmore Law Firm for this estate planning. And one of the things I really like about what you do is that you also refer people to your clients that you feel are experts, that you've got a track record with. And that's the hardest thing, I think, for people that are starting out. And if you're one of the 70% of people who don't have a will, I can't imagine you have all the other things that we're talking about today. So 70% of our listeners out there, if you're listening, go to realtalktexas.com. and just tell me what you need, and we'll put you in touch with the expert in that area or that field. After the break, we're going to talk more with Lori Ashmore Peters of the Ashmore Law Firm in Dallas, and we're going to find out more of what you might need to know out there as a listener on how to protect your assets. And she's going to bring all this together for us and tie it in nice and tidy and talk to us about, if I have no plans, where do I get started? If I have a bright future ahead of me, how do I make sure that I'm set up so I don't have to go backwards? So don't go away. Make sure you go to realtalktexas.com, send me that note and say, send me that book, and I'll send you that free book from Lori. So stay tuned.